Welcome all you Resolume, Arena, Avenue, and Wire happy people out there. I have a new patch to explore with you today to talk about the tutorial of how to use this 3D contour lines. 3D contour lines was the brainchild of some things that I've been watching on all of my social medias. I do a lot of Pinterest and watching images, and this is also something that I ended up doing a great deal in college from an art course, was to create 3D contour lines from an image, utilizing the shape of the object and then bending the outer edges to make it look like it's three-dimensional in the space that it exists. This is utilizing a black and white image. It has to be straight black and white. Those work best. And what will happen is when you take a black and white image and apply the 3D effect onto your subject, you'll get this effect. So some things to work through, just to kind of give you, I just wanted to kind of give you a rundown of the actual effect to show you all the different sliders and what they do. Some of this is more for refining. I tried my hardest to break down the pieces to refine the edge, and then at the bottom is to refine the lines that are behind the scenes. And I'll show you what I mean. So let's first go through the refining of the bends around the image, around the object. A lot of these are to resize those areas that bend the edges of the actual object itself. So refine bend, that's what this does. It bends those areas. It increases the size of those bend areas. And then you have this expand the edge. This basically increases that size so that it bubbles more. In some cases you may want that, but it helps to kind of refine that to kind of get where you want it to be. And then you can also use them in tandem. So like for instance, I could do something like this, and then it gives you a slider, like a control over those kinds of things. Also, the same thing with this edge curve. This is all the different kinds of ways in which you can bend the lines. Some of these will act differently according to what you have in your object space, in your window here. So like for instance, elastic out, it bends it in a different way so that it's the curve of the edges, because the edges are blurred basically behind the scenes. The part that you're not seeing is that your black and white image is being created as a blur, so that you have a soft edge. And then what you're doing is you're basically shaping that soft edge in order to create this bend look. So what this does is it basically bends that curve, that blur, from black to white in different areas. It has to do with how you take a gradient and ramp up the curve from black to white, and that's how you get this kind of bend look. So behind the scenes, just know that's kind of what's going on behind the scenes. But you can get all kinds of different crazy results with this. So the quadratic in is going to be closer to the edge of the white, and then there'll be a kind of a sharper gradation between black and white, and so that's the reason why this edge is very sharp. You can still bend them, of course, but it acts differently with that quadratic in versus the linear or the scene in, or SINE. I don't know how you say that. It changes the way in which it's affected. Just to kind of give you an example. So like for instance, if I go scene out, now it's going to do to the edge, from the edge of the white, it's going to expand out to the black instead of the other way around when I do a scene out or versus a scene in. Scene in will go from black to white. It'll change the curve from black to white instead of white to black. So it'll push the edges in a different way. So just keep that in mind. The shape base is basically what happens is it's pushing up the lines, the edges. And behind the scenes, it's using a UV map to push that edge up so that you can create this 3D effect. And so you'll notice what happens is the bend will come around the corner and then it's being pushed up to give it that 3D look because it's staggered from the actual lines behind it. So it gives the optical illusion that it is actually in 3D space. So that's the premise behind it. So there's some really nice we're going to play with some of the features here and kind of give you an example. So like for instance, the shape base, we could really push it up. You'll notice that here now there's a very sharp edge. It's not very easily seen, but you'll notice that it's striping in the opposite direction as to what's actually there. So just kind of to give you an example of what that does. So now let's go back. It's this one. We're going to go back to like, an edge like that. And then what we can do is we can move the shape base, I believe. Yes. So the shape base, we could really push that up. You'll notice as you push that up, you'll see the edge. So just kind of keep that in mind. You could hide that by basically expanding your image so that it pushes those edges out so you're not seeing that. But I figured this was close enough that you really don't need to go any higher than that. There may be cases where because of how your image is set in the space, it may require it to be kind of finessed. And so that kind of gives you that option to finesse those edges. And then you also have this shape brightness. The shape brightness is based on the actual contrast of the image in the inside. So it's also taking in consideration the blur, so it just goes over the edge. I figured in some cases you may want to be able to kind of refine that edge or just give it just a slight touch of brightness. And so that way when you're like using something that's very, very dark or very close to each other, like for instance, let's say you have this like blue and it's like this. What you could do is you could just slightly just increase the light just ever so slightly so to kind of give it more pronunciation or pronounced look in that area. So that's the reason for that. Also, likewise, in the same way, you could also add a darkness. So that was a nice little feature. I just wanted to make sure that some cases you may want that. Okay, so now we're going to go back to like the blue and white fleur-de-lis. So let's say you wanted to increase the line amount. The line amount is actually being increased incrementally, so you'll notice that there's a gap, so you have to kind of keep that in mind. You're just going to want to eyeball that, and this looks relatively close to this edge. So when you change your line size, or excuse me, your line amount, that's what you're going to get is there's going to be an edge where you just kind of have to kind of eyeball it, line it up. There are probably easy ways to fix that or adjust that, but how I've created the lines in the background, that was just, that was the quick and dirty. That was the easiest way to do that without going too crazy into it. It works just fine for what we're trying to accomplish. Also, the same thing with like the line size. The line size will allow you to shrink the size of the line. You'll notice that there's that one line that's acting out of whack. You just change your line amount, just kind of increase it just a little bit and just kind of finesse it, so like that, right? So now you get a smooth transition between the lines. So just kind of keep that in mind. Your line amount and your line size are work in tandem. So your line size is going to change the actual size of the line, but then the line amount is going to allow you to adjust in between the gap for that final line where the seams meet, basically. So that's the quick and dirty. So now, like you have the BG bend. This one was fun. I struggled with this a great deal because I was trying to figure out a way to make it so that when you bend this area, how do you get it to make that curve? That was lots of fun to try to figure out. But I was able to get it. I'm gonna increase my line size here real quick. You'll notice that I really kind of liked how, because the line bend is so close to the fleur-de-lis, you kind of lose some of that fleur-de-lis. I thought that could be interesting, especially if you wanted to move that edge so that it creates this like ocean wave, but it kind of goes over the peak of the peak of the silhouette of the fleur-de-lis. So I thought that could be visually interesting. So I just kind of left that in. But there are some options here to kind of get the bend to work the way it should, as I intended it. So the BG bend, that's the background bend. You'll notice that I had a heck of a time trying to get this straight edge to go away. I was able to figure it out by just kind of finessing the bend by changing the gradation value. But getting that gradation value to be in the proper place sometimes it was causing all kinds of issues. So I've kind of given you these options here to kind of play around with that. So if you want this bend to be like really high, you could, but like, let's say you just want it straight edged, you can. And so, like, for instance, there may be times where you want to have like a different kind of effect. So like, for instance, we could push out the bends so that they're over the top. And because they're over the top, you're going to get this straight flat. This is where the white of the gradient is making that flat shape. So I thought that's visually interesting. I kind of like this. I could see this quirkiness being added. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to leave that in. I think that is going to be exciting. I think that could do some really kind of cool stuff. So then the other thing is, like, you could change the ratio so that it's not so bent in that area. So now you still have that flat area, but everything else is bending around. Just kind of give it an option. It's not, most people are probably going to want it to be... let me get back to where we were. Most people are going to probably want the bend to be more like this, where it's just like it looks like it's a nice flat curve. And you can also, again, create the peaks and valleys. I gave this BG shift at the end in case, for whatever reason, you didn't want the lines to move. Like, let's, for instance, say you wanted 0, 0. So there's no line movement whatsoever. You just want the stripe. What you could do is there may be a case where, for instance, you want the line to move up or you want the line to move down, but you like the curve, but you don't want the curve to be exactly behind this area. Like, let's say you wanted it in a certain area. You could shift the bend so that it's curved, but then it's not behind the fleur-de-lis, or you have another object where the object's to the right or the object is to the left, and you want to be able to, basically have the curve somewhere else. You'll notice that right now I can see it. I don't know if you guys can see it in this video. There is a slight peak here, so I'm going to just adjust that just a little bit. I'm going to push my BG bend up just ever so slightly, so now there's a smoother bend. So some of this is, just kind of tweaking, and once you've got it to where you want it, then it'll work really nicely. So for instance, I might want it moving up, and I might want to moving it, let's say, in a different direction, so that it creates this kind of illusion effect. But let's say that's just a little too fast. I like mine a little slow so that you can see it just draping or, affecting the object that's in front of it, the fleur-de-lis. And then I might want to change the line amount so that it is very, very, like, they're very few lines. I could even make it so that, they're thinner. And so you get this very smooth effect. That was the idea behind this. So there may be some cases where you want to fiddle with it, enjoy yourself, have some great time. I hope you like this. I hope it really interests you. Thank you for checking it out. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you guys